It's wonderful to see so many of you here on this night. And to be honored along with Stanley means so much to me. For Stanley and I have been friends, co-workers, colleagues for almost 30 years. Stanley's a great man, and I love him dearly. I've known David Krieger and the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation throughout your courageous history of 25 years. We have been together. And what important, innovative, challenging work you have done over those critical years, and I'm proud to be part of it. It's really a profound honor to follow people like the Dalai Lama and Jody Williams and Desmond Tutu. And then coming after last year's honorees, the incomparable singing trio, Peter, Paul, and Mary, I feel like I should sing Blowing in the Wind, or If I Had a Hammer. But Mary Regas said, please spare them. This award means so much to me. It reaches into the deep places of my spirit, and I am so grateful. Mark, your words touched my heart, and I'm grateful for those words, and they will empower me for the living of these next years of my life. But they did remind me of a story. One day, a speaker was introduced like this: listen to this man, for he really is a great man, as is evidenced by the fact that he made $1 million in California oil. So listen to him. Well, the speaker responded with thanks, but he was a little bit embarrassed because some items were there being recited, but they really weren't related to the truth. He said, he was introduced as being important because he had made $1 million in California oil. He said, first, it wasn't California, it was Pennsylvania. Second, it wasn't oil, it was coal. Third, it wasn't $1 million, it was 100,000. Fourth, it wasn't me, but my brother. And fifth, he didn't make it, he lost it. But facts aside, I'm glad to be here. Well, I am George Regas, and I'm glad to be here. I don't know much about making $1 million, but I do know a few things about peacemaking. And they asked me to make an address, and I have carefully prepared something to say to you. And the first point of this speech is about President-elect Obama and peacemaking. There is a deep, deep rejoicing with the election of Barack Obama. All over the world, Obama's election has sent a message that hope is viable, that change is really possible, and that peace is on its way. So, President-elect Obama, hear us. Your first decision as president must be to instruct the Joint Chiefs of Staff to prepare a sensible plan of ending the Iraq war and occupation. Get us out of Iraq. No more arguments about timetables. And if you establish a peace department and allow Rabbi Leonard Bierman and me to head it up, and then allow us to bring onto our active board Reverend Ann Howard and Rabbi Stephen Jacobs and Stanley Scheinbaum and Dr. Nazir Khaja and Mike Farrell and Bob Scheer and Steve Rohde, then we will have peace in this world. When both John McCain and Barack Obama during the presidential campaign would say, "We are the greatest country in the world, the city shining on a hill, that America with our history is exceptional," that rhetoric always pushed me away. Not that I don't love America, I love it deeply. But this kind of thinking, this exceptionalism, is central to the Iraq tragedy. At the grave, we are all equal. And the suffering of one is not more important than the suffering of another. And this reality has been tragically missing from the American psyche. I think of all those children killed in Iraq as a result of our war. I think of those 30,000 children who die every day because of hunger and malnutrition, and my heart is broken. Very clearly, modern war is total war. With the lethality of modern weapons, there can be no discrimination between combatants and civilians. Some studies say more than 1 million civilians, children, have been killed in the Iraq War. And we need to proclaim as loudly as we can that war with the face it wears today is sin itself. Jesus would bless Howard Zinn when he said, "There is no flag large enough to cover the shame of killing innocent people." The sin and evil at the heart of this war, this Bush war in Iraq, is the belief that an American child is of more value than an Iraqi child, that an American baby is more precious than an Iraqi baby. Therefore, a reaffirmation of our common humanity and our equality in joy and in pain must be given primacy if there's ever to be peace on this earth. Barack Obama must restore American moral credibility, closing Guantanamo, banning all torture, and ending the war in Iraq and our occupation. That will provide a start, but only that. He must inspire the world, as he has America, that great things are possible and that we can have a world without war. My second point, the worldwide economic crises are overwhelming. They are significant moral issues surrounding this bleak situation. Larry Bartels of Princeton University is one of the country's leading political scientists, and he has some provocative things to say in his new book, Unequal Democracy, the Political Economy of the New Gilded Age. He says, from the 1940s to the 1970s, the real income of the poorest fifth of Americans more than doubled, advancing faster than any other quintile. And since 1974, the pattern has been skewed significantly toward the rich. The years 1979 through 2008 have been calamitous for the poor and even the middle class in the United States. Larry Bartels writes that he was surprised to find in his research how profoundly partisan differences affected economic outcomes. It is true, there are many causes for the growing inequality in our globalized economy, but it is unwise to assume there is no cause and effect relationship between government policies and income distribution. Professor Bartels asserts economic inequality is in substantial part a political phenomenon. The war system is so deeply embedded in this nation, in education, in government, in industry. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate for economics, is saying in a new book, The $3 Trillion War, that the Iraq War will eventually cost the United States $3 to $5 trillion. 40% of the 1,650,000 people who have been deployed in Iraq are coming home with disabilities, some serious disabilities. And that's an obligation we must honor, and we will be paying for this for decades to come. We have borrowed every dime for the Iraq War. George Bush has tried to pretend that you can have a war and not pay the price. And what a tragedy. The war system is a criminal mismanagement of humanity's resources. My third point deals with nuclear weapons. The political reality that nuclear war still remains an option for America, Russia, China, Britain, France, Pakistan, India, and Israel, North Korea. That reality is the paramount moral issue of our time. James Carroll, whom many of us respect and love, his writings, wrote in the Boston Globe, October 13, 2008, a column where he says the word meltdown comes naturally to the lips this last week, referring to the collapse of the financial markets. But Carroll talks about another meltdown, which is the purpose of the nuclear bomb. He says the economic meltdown caused us to ignore a much greater problem. That very week, over the signature of the Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, and the Secretary of Energy, Samuel Bodman, the government released the statement, National Security and Nuclear Weapons in the 21st Century. The two officials argue that the time has come for the development of new nuclear weapons, the so-called reliable replacement warheads, RRW, because nuclear weapons remain an essential and enduring element, they say, of American military strategy. And the aging arsenal of several thousand deployed nukes and many more stored nukes must be replaced. Obviously, Bush will not succeed in this new nuclear weapons proposal. He will not get it approved in Congress. What Gates and Bodman are doing is urging the nuclear, what they're doing at the urging of the nuclear establishment is putting this item at the very top of the next president's agenda. For 20 years, the United States has been ambivalent about the nuclear arsenal. And that indecision was enshrined in the policy that America would lead the post-Cold War world in the ongoing reduction of nuclear weapons, aiming at the ultimate abolition called for by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. However, at the same time, we would maintain a sizable nuclear force, both deployed and stored, as a protection, a hedge, against the reemergence of some Cold War-style threat. This nuclear policy was deadly contradicting. It simply made the U.S. leadership on meaningful nuclear weapons reduction impossible. Today, nuclear nations want to renew and expand their arsenals, keeping their own nuclear advantage, and non-nuclear states, especially Iran, are moving towards acquiring nuclear weapons. And the Gates-Bodman recent proposal is saying that if the policy of deterrence fails, these are their words, there will be an actual use of nuclear weapons to defeat an enemy. That is incomprehensible. Once nuclear war begins, all nations and all notions of victory and defeat are meaningless. Rabbi Bierman, Leo Beck Temple, and I, along with All Saints, for 10 years, 1979 to 1990, we had the Interfaith Center to reverse the nuclear arms race. And I can still hear the words of Dr. Marvin Goldberger, distinguished physicist and former president of Caltech. He spoke at one of our meetings these words: "Those who use the rhetoric that suggests we can survive and win a nuclear war are certifiably insane. Such rhetoric is the greatest illusion of our day. It points to the moral bankruptcy of our age." The Non-Proliferation Treaty has integrity only if we are committed to the centerpiece of that treaty, a movement towards nuclear abolition. In the United States, the public has been manipulated to focus almost exclusively on nuclear proliferation. And so there is no attention given to the possession and the continued development of nuclear weapons and the thinly disguised reliance on their threatened use. When we deal with Iran, we are using a nuclear double standard. We only discuss proliferation. The United States must commit to nuclear disarmament if we are to have integrity. the real reason Iran should not have nuclear weapons is because no country should have nuclear weapons. And the only way to prevent Iran and other aspiring countries acquiring those deadly, world-destroying nuclear weapons is for this country and Russia to disarm. To deal with Iran with any integrity, we must move on those two fronts, non-proliferation and equally the disarmament front. We must build an effective system of collective security that doesn't rely in any way on nuclear weapons. I have a fourth point. The time they've given me is almost run out, but not quite. None of this will happen without you and me. If there is to be a progressive agenda, Barack Obama must use his bully pulpit to continue to inspire and educate America to move this country in a new direction. But he needs a grassroots movement for peace. And if Obama is to succeed in great ways as our president, which I think he can, he must have us as peace protagonists at the very center of his administration. Franklin Delano Roosevelt recognized his ability to push legislation through Congress depended on the pressure generated by protesters and organizers. He once told a group of activists who sought his support for their legislation, "You've convinced me. Now go out and make me do it." There are many factors contributing to Obama's great victory, but the real key to his success was grassroots organizing. And now Obama's supporters will need to transform that electoral energy into grassroots movement for change. Winning the election was only the beginning, the first stage of a broader movement to help America become a nation of compassion and justice and peace. Do you remember during the Vietnam War that Newsweek cover in 1971 of that naked 9-year-old Vietnamese girl running down the road screaming, her skin on fire from a napalm bomb? The picture epitomized the horrific tragedy of the Vietnam War. Americans began rather miraculously to identify with that child. She was just like our own children. She too was precious to a mother and father and precious to God. That realization of the sacredness of all life was central to the mobilization and final victory of the peace movement during the Vietnam War. And the same motivating experience of compassion can help us build a peace movement today. Virtually every meaningful social transformation in the history of the United States has resulted as a result from nonviolent movements that have mobilized grassroots people power. Well, I closed by saying I hope we remember that there is such a thing as being too late. Will we learn the perils of revenge and violence and war and nuclear threats soon enough to act and change our ways? Will we learn before it's too late? Of all of Michelangelo's powerful figures, none is more poignant than the man in the Last Judgment being dragged down to hell by the demons. A hand over one eye, and in the other eye, a dire sense, a dire recognition. He understood, but all too late. Michelangelo was right. Hell is truth seen too late. Tonight, we mobilize. Tonight, we mobilize. Thank you very much.